Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the week that we're reminded of the tragedy of the Grenfell Tower, we also learn about this scandal, which is of companies issuing false fire safety certificates, these EWS1s as they're referred. I understand there is no such thing as an official register for these certificates, yet tens of thousands of homeowners are affected by this, now facing properties that are uninsurable and unsaleable. So can I ask the leader for a debate in government time to discuss this scandal and the need for an official register of these certificates?
Leader of the House.
Well, absolutely. Can I thank him for raising this? And as a constituency MP myself, with many, many tall buildings in Manchester Central, I am all too familiar, unfortunately, with the issues around the issuing of EWS1 forms and the whole risk assessment industry that surrounds and has grown since the Grenfell Tower. So he can rest assured that the government is taking these issues incredibly seriously. We did issue a remediation safety action plan just before Christmas, but I will ensure there is ample time for the House to debate these matters.
Julia Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, the Grenfell tragedy was an appalling one, but it also threw a blanket of uncertainty over countless residents in many of our constituencies who were trapped in cladded properties. So when I hear the Deputy Prime Minister talk about a new regulatory regime and change, I confess I feel very nervous that any changes to the regulatory regime will throw further uncertainty over those who are still trapped in their homes. So can she provide assurances to the House that any move she makes will not create further uncertainty about the standards to which buildings need to be remediated? And then can I also highlight to her the case of my constituents in Harrow Wood who had their buildings assessed by a fire risk assessor who was subsequently struck off. Those people that thought they were going to be released from this terrible stasis are now back to not knowing where they stand. So can she please also look into these concerns?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I hope that what we're announcing today and what we're trying to do is around bringing clarity to the system. I think one of the things that came out of the Phase 2 report was where the system was disjointed, and actually bringing clarity will hopefully make sure that people understand what they are meant to do, what their legal obligations are, that we expect them to do it, and if they don't do it, there will be serious consequences for those that don't. I also point to the remediation acceleration plan. I completely understand that many people still are in buildings that are unsafe, and that is unacceptable, and that's why this government is taking action on that. And in terms of the Horringwood case that she mentioned, I'm happy for her to meet with the Building Safety Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also thank the Deputy Prime Minister for her response to the report on Grenfell and the tragedy. Madam Deputy Speaker, flats in a large leasehold block in my constituency were given a B2 EWS1 certificate by Adam Kisiak of Tri Fire Limited. He and Tri Fire have now been investigated for potential malpractice by the Institute of Fire Engineers. One of my constituents, a leaseholder in the block, told me that they don't know if their certificates are valid. They don't know whether they'll be able to be remediated through the Building Safety Fund, and they don't even know whether their block actually does still have a safety issue, quite apart from the fact that those needing to move can't sell because mortgage lenders won't lend. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, how and when can leaseholders like my constituents get the assurance they need and that there will be no more fire inspectors being allowed to get away with what Adam Kisiak did?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that very important question, and I'm sorry for the situation that her constituents found themselves in. I understand the relevant professional body is investigating the case that is mentioned, and it would be wrong of me to comment on the specifics, but we are working to encourage mortgage lenders to act proportionately to support leaseholders and buyers in buildings with EWS1s that mortgage lenders are not accepting, and where buildings in the remediation scheme or the leaseholder is protected by the Building Safety Act, we expect the 10 lenders who have signed the industry cladding statement to honour it and not require the EWS1. And if the member wants to speak to the Safety Minister on this particular case going forward, I'm sure he'd be happy to speak to her.
I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister's statement today and particularly welcome the Government's acceptance of the recommendation to professionalise and regulate fire engineers and assessors, not least because at the committee stage of the Fire Safety Bill, I tabled new Clause 2, which would have created a public register of fire risk assessors, and it would have done so 5 years ago. Had my amendment been accepted, we may have been able to avoid what is now the developing scandal of the issuance of potentially fraudulent EWS1 certificates by Tri Fire, which could now have a devastating impact on thousands of leaseholders, including some in my constituency of St Albans. In light of concerns both in the media and concerns that have been raised in this House today by members of all sides, could I please urge the Deputy Prime Minister to both convene a meeting for all MPs whose constituents are affected, and would she agree with me that it is now time that the police investigate these reports?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will expand that invitation. I'm sure the Safety Minister will be happy to do that. And we will legislate to make it a mandatory requirement for fire risk assessors that are competent to perform their critical roles, certified against approved standards by a UKS accredited certification body. And the Government is supporting an industry-led British standard for fire risk assessors that's currently being drafted. And once this is completed, this will create a single clear definition of competence against which certification and qualification should be mapped.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. And can I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for what she said today and how she said it. I hope that the families of the survivors of Grenfell Tower have heard what you have to say and find some reassurance in the acceptance of all of the recommendations. I have residents in my constituency of Surrey Heath who are today trapped in just the latest chapter of the fire safety scandal. Residents who have EWS1 forms similarly signed off by the notorious now fire safety engineer Adam Kiziak, who find themselves unable to sell their properties, unable to remortgage, but even more fundamentally, who don't know whether they are living in a dangerous building or not, and in neighbouring buildings built at exactly the same time, but signed off or have had their EWS1 forms produced by a different fire safety engineer, they have already been stripped of their cladding. I'm incredibly grateful to hear that you have accepted recommendations 15 and 16 and that you are looking at a professionalisation of the fire safety industry, greater regulation and a commitment to greater recruitment, because we know that those are some of the issues that have underpinned the EWS1 scandal. But can I urge you and your team, please, to think about emergency measures. And it can't just be right that we overlook the EWS1 forms that people already have because people don't know whether they are living in safe buildings or not. It cannot be right that we just overlook those forms. We have to fundamentally, rapidly reassess the safety of those buildings in order to allow them to be sellable or remediated again. Thank you.
Well, again, I refer back to what I said to my honourable friend, and I absolutely accept that people should be in safe and secure homes. The government remediation funds have a robust audit process in place to assess the quality of the fire risk assessments of external wards, and the audit process ensures that assessments that are carried out for buildings that are in our remediation funding programmes meet the appropriate standards, and where these standards are not met, we will take action to ensure that this is addressed.